Okay, so first thing, if you haven't done it already, go up to File, choose Save Scene As, and name it whatever you want. I named it Battle because it's the um, battle scene that's going to be used over and over again, so you can certainly name it Battle to be appropriate. The reason why you're saving this is the way Unity breaks down applications is it breaks it down into scenes. So in RPG, a battle would be a scene. That way you don't have to redesign battles over and over again. You make one battle scene, and then what you do is you just put in code that says, okay, use a different background, use a different enemy, and that way you recycle and reuse your code. Other example of scenes would be, say, in an old school side-scrolling game, a level would be a scene. So level 1-1, level 1-2, that would be a scene. A title scene, a title screen would be a scene. Um, Old school survival horror where you walk through a door and an area loads. You walk through another door, another area loads. Well, each load point would be a scene. So the hallway in the room that loads, that would be a scene. The only time that you may not have a game that's broken down into scenes are like open world games, because in open world games you're constantly having assets loaded in and assets being purged. So because you constantly have that influx and outflow of assets, you're not necessarily using a scene-based system. A lot of those games use proprietary systems, like Witcher, I believe, use their own engine, and so on and so forth. But for a game like this, we're going to use scenes because that's how Unity does it. So what you would do is when you're walking on the overworld and you have, say, a random encounter, the code would say, okay, load the battle scene, and then it takes over from there. So now that we've done that, we're going to start looking at damage. So damage, like a lot of other aspects of a game, is going to be basically a bunch of variables. Uh, Characters are going to have hit points, that will be a variable. The amount of damage you do will be a variable, and a calculation will determine how much damage is done. And so that calculation, depending how complex the game is, might have 6, 7, 8, 9 variables. There may be a strength factor and a defense factor and a buff or a debuff. So you might actually wind up having like 9 or 10 variables all combined to make a single value for damage. So we're going to have static variables. So open up the script for the suit and let's add public static float, and we'll call this suit HP, and we'll set that to 100. Public static float suit max HP. We'll set that also to 100. So this is the current HP. This is their max HP. So that way what you can do is, like, for instance, if a character gets healed, well, you need to know what they can be healed up to. You don't want to overheal them. Let's go to the witch. Actually, let's save that first. Let's go to the witch. Public static. And again, a static variable is a variable that's accessible anywhere through the application. So we want this to be fixed. We want it to be a set value, and we only want it to change when we say so. So public static float, which HP equals, say, just 50. Public static float, which max HP equals 50. And again, try to come up with a naming convention that makes sense for you. We'll save that. Okay, so now they have hit points. The enemy does not. Now, with the enemy, you may not want to use static HP. You may want to use, what you would do is you would just say public float and then say pumpkin HP or enemy HP and skip the word static. That way, every time the enemy is instantiated, it resets. So we'll give that a go. It's possible we may have to turn it to a static variable. It's not the end of the world if we do. So we'll just call this public float enemy HP. Now you could say, wait a second, but if you've got 3 enemies, won't they all have the same value? And here's the thing. If this script is attached to 3 different enemies, because it's not static, even though each enemy will have enemy HP, each enemy HP will be a different enemy HP. So you can actually have multiple values with exactly the same name and not have there be a conflict as long as it's not static. So this is actually perfectly legitimate and very common. That way, every time an enemy is instantiated, you've given it HP. Okay, so we've got that in place. They have, I'm not going to do a max HP right now because they're not going to heal, but you certainly could do that. You could do a max enemy HP as well. So now we need damage to incur. So I think I mentioned before in the earlier video, you really don't use collision detection in a RPG. You can usually use like a dice roll random number generator that says, okay, did they hit or not? Or maybe they always hit. Depends on the game. Some games you can't miss. Some games it's random. So what we're going to do is we're not going to do any kind of collision detection per se. What we're going to do is we've already determined when an attack ends. Like for the witch, right here, return witch. So this is where we'd say, okay, the damage has been done. Same thing for the suit. The suit returns, okay, we'll say that's when the damage has been done. So again, once you carve out that area, you could just keep appending more and more to it. Now, the real proper way to do a UI is you go up to Game Object and you create UI objects. But I don't want to really do anything that complicated at the moment. And in a 2D game, you could really get away with not using a UI. 3D game, not so much. You really need the UI to be overlaid on top of everything. But in a 2D game, as I mentioned, everything has this in order in the layer. So you can effectively create a UI just by putting like the text on a higher layer. So you say, okay, everything else is below layer 10. All text is at layer 10. You've effectively created a UI layer. So what we're going to do is we're going to do game object, and we're going to create empty, and we'll call this damage text. So we click on damage text, click on add component, click on mesh, text mesh. You see it adds a mesh renderer and a text mesh. What's in here is this will be what's in the text field is what gets displayed. So like if we put in test, you'll see it in just a second. So let's see, we want character size. This has to be shrunk, so we'll make this like 0.15. Font size, we'll make this like 20. Now, unlike some other objects, this does not have an order and layer. That's the only downside. If you use the UI, it automatically puts it on top. Here you have to manually put it on top, which is no big deal. So right click, create C#, and we'll call this damn text con. Click back on our object, put damn text con on it, and we'll open that up. So in the start section, we want to bring it to the top. So get component, renderer, sorting order, and we'll just set it to 10. So save that. Now you could say, well, what about the z coordinate? Can't you just take this and move it forward? And the answer is no, because z is ignored. So as long as something is in front of the camera, that's all that matters. Otherwise, the z is ignored. Let's move this around just a bit so we can see how that looks. So that's the size. So it's a little bit too small. So let's make that a font of 30. Looks better. Like I said, it will be in the front when the script runs. And we want, that's going to be a number. And let's make it red. So if you click on color here, you can choose red or any other color, but usually you'd want damage to be red. I suppose damage could be white. Your choice. Totally arbitrary. It's just that easy to change it. Oh yeah, and for the font, it defaults to Arial if you don't select one. So we'll select that just so there isn't any glitches. All right, so what we're going to do is this has been saved. So watch what happens. See how it's in front of the bars now? It's a little bit hard to tell because the bars are small, but it's definitely in front of the bars. Let's move it just a little bit so you can tell for certain, because now you can see it's definitely behind everything else. Now it's in front of everything else. Okay, so what do we want to do with this? We need to have this set to a value. So we need to have it be set to damage. So we're going to have damage be a static variable. So we have a battle flow script, which we said is basically the GM script. So we go to battle flow. So public, static, float. We'll say current damage. It'll be set to 0. We'll come here. Come to here. And what we'll do is in the start section, we will update this. So again, this script, the damage text con is attached to our damage text object. So get component, this time we want text mesh. And this time we want text equals we have to declare where the value is set. So battle flow, and there it is right on top, current damage. We might have to do toString. In the earlier versions of Unity, you couldn't just put a number into a text. You had to set it to toString. So let's see what happens. So battle flow, we set it to 0. So what's going to happen is everything works. Yeah, we have to convert it. Okay. So if everything works as well, what's going to happen is this will no longer say test. It will say 0. But here's the error message I was talking about. So we go back to damage text, and you just do dot toString with parentheses. That easy. And there you go. You are now transferring a numerical value to that text. So now it's just a matter of calculating the damage. So and I've mentioned this before, this is an iterative process. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to put a constant into that into the text field, and then we can turn it into a variable later on. So let's go to suitcon, and here's the attack. So we're going to say, again, battle flow, we have to declare that variable is current damage is equal to 40. Go to which. Battle flow dot, dot current damage equals, she'll do more damage, she'll do 80. And we'll save it. So, she does damage. Actually, for consistency's sake, let's put it at the top of both. So they both declare what that variable should be. Now we need that variable to be transferred to the monster. So what we want to do is we want, not to the monster, my apologies. Yes, we're doing damage to the monster, but right now we're just transferring the value to that text. So how do we do that? Well, we've already done it because this in the start section is saying set it to that variable. So it's a two-step procedure. You take this variable and you give it a value, and then you take this attribute and you set that variable to it. So to make this work, what we need to do is we need the damage text object to be a prefab. So just drag and drop it into your asset area, destroy it, and now what we're going to do is both the witch and the suit need to be aware of that prefab. So in both of them, public transform, and we'll call this dam text obj. Again, whenever I'm using a variable to refer to an object, I try to append obj just so when I see it in the list, I'll know what it's referring to, or at least I know that it's an object. So public transform dam text obj. And again, even though this is the same, I did it lowercase t, let's be consistent, make it capital. Even though it's exactly the same, because it's not a static variable, there's no conflict, and those are two separate individual objects. So, click on which, and there it is. So there's our damage tech object. Click on the suit. There it is. And now they're both aware of that object. So now we need to instantiate it. So in the case of the witch, we don't want it to be instantiated until she returns, because that's when the fireball has struck. So let's do that here. There might be a bit of a timing issue. We might actually have to break this up a little bit. But for now, like I said, it's an iterative process. So instantiate, and whenever you hear instantiate, think spawn. So instantiate that damn text object. Say I know which one it is because it says obj. Where do we want to instantiate? For the moment, we're going to use constants, but you'll eventually make them variables as there's multiple enemies. So he's sitting at basically 6, 0, and we don't care about that. So we kind of want it to appear above it. So like 5.5 to make it more centered. So like move it over to the left a little bit and go up like maybe 0.5. So new vector 3, Like we said, it's going to be like 5.5. Have to drop another F since it's a decimal. And we said it's going to be like 0.5. And, oops, sorry. Actually, let's make this a vector 2. Sorry, making it too complicated. So new vector 2, 5.5f and 0.5f, comma. It looks a little crazy, but this is just the second argument. So this is the first argument, what's been instantiated. This is the second, where it's being instantiated. And then the third one is the rotation. We will use DamText object's own rotation. So watch what happens. See, it appeared. Timing's a little bit off, but then again, you could always change the speed. But it did 80 points of damage. Now, okay, so now what we want to do, back to DamText, we want this to self-destroy. So destroy game object. So destroy game object destroys the object the script is attached to. The optional argument is time, so we'll say 1 second. And now we'll go to the which, and we're just going to copy this, because it's the same thing we're trying to do. In this case, we'll have it appear. So hers is a little bit different because this is happening already when they've returned, but we'll still go with it for now. So 1, damage appears, disappears. 1, damage appears, but like I said, got the timing issue because the monster hasn't moved yet. But again, that's just a tweak. So now we've seen how you can show damage. So last thing we're going to do, and then we'll call it for one video, we want that text to be animated. We want it to move up. So let's go to our damage text object, add component, physics 2D, rigid body 2D, and let's be lazy about this. Let's just give it negative gravity. Let's use like negative 0.5. So yes, you can make changes to an object even though it's a prefab. Just like that, damage is animated. So we haven't actually changed any HP yet. We're just displaying damage. So let's stop there for now. And then in the next video, we'll actually look at changing the various HPs.